Hi, this is your mini lecture for Chapter 13 on evaluating corporate ethics. All right, so why do firms need ethics training? Well, according to PricewaterhouseCoopers, um, in an interview with 3,877 senior execs from 78 countries, for their global economic crime survey, 34% of the companies had been a victim of economic crime, and 56% reported that the most serious fraud committed to the company was by their own employees. And it impacted all firms. Specifically, though, the larger firms or those with more than 1,000 employees had a higher percentage of fraud. So why do people commit fraud? Well, there's a lack of adequate internal controls, meaning that there was the opportunity, nobody was overseeing them. Maybe they had a personal financial need, um, giving them an incentive, or they were just ignorant. They weren't even aware that what they were doing was wrong. And how do we catch them? Well, we have processes in place for controls. We work on having a culture that does not support fraud. And Those are kind of the big ones. And then another way that fraudsters are caught is either by accident or by authorities. So one thing that we can do to prevent fraud and to maintain positive ethics is to establish an ethics training program. So we want to be able to provide resources or the necessary tools needed to understand ethical decision making, help people to communicate and give them an opportunity to assess their ethical priorities, explain the procedure when employees are in violation of ethical standards. So what are those sanctions? Give them feedback and have the opportunity for employees to be able to identify ethical programs that could be initiated based on the firm's ethical standards. Make sure that employees understand the code of conduct. Um, Provide self-development, enhance the ability of employees to increase their level of reflection as it relates to ethics, and then create a positive and strong ethical work climate that supports the systems and code of ethics that are in place. You may also need to have a global ethics training program because as we've learned, what is ethical in one country is not always considered to be the same ethical standard in another. So a global ethical training program should be established when a company does business globally um, and when they have a global presence. And it's especially important when we need to understand local cultures and behavior. We need to have this specifically because different cultures have different interpretations of what is ethical and what is not. For example, copying somebody's creative works in the United States is considered unethical, but in many other countries, it is considered perfectly fine to do. We want to make sure that we educate on international human rights and laws. Um, and we really want to address the global cultural dimensions and ethics in our training programs. Um, so think of Hofstede's cultural dimensions, which looks at individualism versus collectivism, I versus we, high context, low context cultures, certainty, avoidance, masculine versus feminine, high versus low power, distance, etc. How do we enforce our ethics training programs? We allow for reporting to take place. So employees can report actions that they see as a violation of the code of ethics. Um, so, and for a compliance program to work, in order to properly enforce a code of ethics or to have it work, it has to be properly enforced. Um, and to have a tone from the top or from senior management is really important when enforcing this code of ethics so that people know that it's really a serious situation. I just got an email asking to be, no, not asking, but looking for people to apply to be on a sexual misconduct committee, which would be kind of one of these ways that that the institution is enforcing this code of ethics and what they believe is right and not right, and illegal in that case. Corporate ethics officers. So the Federal Sentencing Guidelines for Organizations Act was passed in 1991, and a component of the act was the government's ability, or the government encouraging firms to implement internal controls to help prevent, detect, and report criminal activities. And so a new role called the Corporate Ethics Officer is just was created. And this is a complex role that's responsible for ensuring actions are taken. And they really act as kind of that person who is the go-to person for ethical issues and concerns. Ethical auditing is another way to evaluate ethical programs, and this is just a comprehensive evaluation of compliance of ethical policies and procedures. It's a good tool used by management to ensure that the ethical conduct described in the Code of Ethics is enforced. And so similar to a financial audit, this is going to be done, by an outside party who is really making sure that the firm is being compliant. Some things that are looked at during an ethical audit include environmental records, human rights, operations in different countries, dealing with military contracts, gambling, production of alcohol, animal rights, marketing, etc. If somebody in an agency or in a firm or a company or organization, whatever you want to call it, notices that somebody else is being unethical and not following the code of ethics, then companies usually have a whistleblowing policy in place or a process in which an employee can inform another person about this potential unethical behavior. And a lot of the times this is done through a hotline or through anonymous reporting. Um, and that is honestly, when we looked at Enron, that is how Enron got caught for their unethical accounting standards. And whistleblowers are now protected after the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, stating that whistleblowers can be reinstated to their old jobs, and they may not be discharged, demoted, suspended, threatened, harassed, or discriminated against because they provided information about fraudulent activities. So that is our Chapter 13 mini lecture. Please contact me if you have questions.